My name is Richard, and I'm feeling whatever the word is for full of experiences and anticipating many more to come. There's quite a lot. And yep, I've come here to see if any of the lessons that we've picked up from 5 years of non-hierarchical organizing can translate into a very different context from where I'm from. I guess a little background about like why are we here? I spent most of the last 5 years working on this Loomio thing, and I stayed at home and looked after the team and kept the home fires burning while my colleagues hit the road and got out into the world and did that thing. And then somewhere between Brexit in the UK and then the election here, I just had this real sense that being in New Zealand was not the most happening place for me to be. Like I had this unresolved sense that there's something up for grabs right now in the world, and I don't really understand what it is or how to help, but I can't reliably make sense of it from New Zealand. So I just tried to figure out some excuse for us to come and get out into the world for a little while. So we're spending most of this year on the road. I've just come from Korea, where they impeached their president recently, which is nice. And working with some groups there that are learning how to translate that protest energy into constructive energy, building new organizations from the grassroots up. And we've got 2.5 months touring around the States, meeting with activists, co-op people, arts people, people that are working in NGOs and in the government. So really trying to hit a lot of different strands and yeah, make sense of it all and see, is there anything from our little bubble in the South Pacific that can translate over here? So the hypothesis is still open, we don't know. But I'll share some stuff and then we can just discuss it together and see if any of it makes sense. From the, what are we up to, 15 of these that I've done so far, it's always a tension between, like it's really easy to step into this pattern of being the preacher that stands up in the front of the room and says, I've got all the answers and you just need to drill them out of me, and that doesn't really help. If your job is to go home tomorrow and run a participatory organization, like you have to figure it out together. There's not a person at the front of the room that has the answers. So I'm trying to provoke some questions and offer some experiences, but you have to do the translation process. Okay, so Nati mentioned Enspiral. That's a collective of 250 people, mostly in New Zealand, but now increasingly distributed. It's EN Spiral, and it's very hard to define what we are. It's a lot of people that want to make the world better with their work, like not as a hobby, but with their daily work, and they all seem to be more or less interested in new forms of organization. So they've got a big appetite for experimenting with different organizational forms. So across those 250 people, we have lots and lots of different legal structures and practices and habits and processes and tools and all these things that are getting shared between all the groups. And one of my jobs is to float above that all and see what's happening and cross-pollinate. I'm called a catalyst. And so I've started to see which patterns are repeating, that are working, that overcome the very common problems of trying to work together in a group. There's no real way to explain to you what a leaderless network of 250 people is. So I'm just going to throw a few ideas out and don't even try and understand it, just try and grab some of the patterns that come out. So the first pattern that has worked really well for us at Enspiral, and I've seen in many other groups now, it's replicating out, which makes me think it works, is really simple. We call it concentric circles. So of the 250 people, we have 200 of them in this outer circle and 50 of them on the inner circle. And the difference between the circles, we call the outer one contributor and the inner one is a member. And that's just a way of distinguishing who's participating from who's committed. So we've all got this intention of we want to share power, we want to be inclusive, we want to invite everyone to participate in everything. But there are still some times when you need to know who's got skin in the game, who are the real stakeholders here. So we've named 2 categories. Other groups will have more categories, but we've made it really clear. This is how you become a contributor. This is your rights and responsibilities. This is how you become a member. This is your expectations. And there's a very clear pathway to transition from one to the next. And that settles a lot of difficulty. Difficulty that, for instance, I discovered and during the Occupy Wall Street movement, which reached all the way to New Zealand. Nati and I met there. We were participating, and just having to make decisions with whoever turned up that day, which really wasn't the best model. If we'd had some way of saying, yes, I'm committed to this thing, then I think we would have made much better decisions. As an example of the difference between the two, so I'm a member and Nati's a contributor. So as a member, I can meet someone and say, hey, I really like the cut of your jib. I think you've got great values. You would fit in well in this network. I can see how you could contribute well here. And just on my own discretion, I can invite someone in, and then they'd become a contributor. And then maybe the contributor will work on some projects. They might bring their own project, like I'm doing this community garden, do you want to help? Or they might start something new with the people they meet there. And then over time, as they build relationships with people, they can become a member once they've won the trust of all of the other members. So there's a very low barrier. I can just invite one person in, but then to join the inner circle, you need to know everybody. So there's that inner circle has extraordinarily high trust, and it enables really different kind of behaviors than you expect from most groups, to know that you've got a full consensus of all the other people in the room that trust you. Just stuff like, if I get an email from one of the other members that says, you should meet this person, they don't have to decorate it with a lot of explanation and cajoling. I just meet them. It's like, okay, they know me, I know them, it's probably a good idea. Really basic. I mean, there's other stuff like someone's house burnt down and we paid their rent, or someone's laptop got stolen and we replaced it. And that's like what you do when you're in a trusting relationship. By the way, it is very warm in here, so if you need to stand up and do stretches and take your shoes off, make yourself comfortable. There is water as well. Where I'm from, we're very informal, so you don't have to have any pretense. I should also note, before I go too far along, if you want to know the nitty-gritty, which we can't really get entirely into, we have one website called handbook.enspiral.com. That's all of our agreements that govern the network. So we have, I think, 8 or 9 policies that govern the whole thing.
Does that include contributors, or is that?
Yeah. And we have a whole lot of guidelines. So we have a minimum set of agreements that govern us, and then a lot of guidelines that explain, this is the communications working group. If you want to make a poster, go talk to them. And so that's sort of where the legislation lives. And then at blog.enspiral.com, you'll find a lot of stories. So if you prefer to learn from a story format rather than from a legal format, that's the place to go. That's written by many, many, many different contributors. I try and stimulate people to write as much as they can online. I think it's really important to share the stories. So what do all these people do? And one of the peculiar things about Enspiral, which I'll put up as the second circle, is that we make community out of money, which most collectives and communities and groups that I work with, the money is kind of a taboo that we push as far away as possible. For some reason at Enspiral we do a lot of stuff with money that helps to grow deeper relationships. I don't quite know how that happened, but it started and now it keeps going. So as an example, all of these people, well, most of them are freelancers. So it started with a software developer who thought, surely since I get paid so much money being a software developer, I could spend a little bit of time working for the man and then have a lot of time to work on climate change and income inequality and these issues that I care about. and he started recruiting other people that were highly paid and wanted some more meaning and impact from their work. So there's this big pool of different freelancers, and it started with software, and then slowly grew to include different kinds of people. So software developers need designers, and they need business people, and they need a lawyer and an accountant, and different kinds of entrepreneurs started to join. And it's still, it's not, the diversity is pretty narrow, but it's slowly widening out. And all of these people that are earning a livelihood through Enspiral voluntarily choose to share some fraction of their income with the collective. So a lot of us, that's zero. I'm not sharing any money. I spend much more than I earn at the moment, so I've got nothing to offer apart from my time and my social capital and my support and enthusiasm. But I don't have any money to offer, whereas at the other end of the spectrum, you have some of these developers are contributing up to 20% of their income because they get work from their association with Enspiral, and so their gratitude is to give money back to the collective. We use a tool called CoBudget, which you can find online at cobudget.co to decide what to do with that money. So all of this money comes in. There's some chunk of it which covers our fixed expenses, our insurance, our software tools that we need to use, and accountants' fees and whatever else the money seems to disappear into. And then the other half that's left over is discretionary spending, and we get to choose together what we're going to spend it on. So this is where the contributors come in. Any contributor, whether they've offered any money or not, can propose that they'd like to have some of the collective money. So that proposal is called a bucket in CoBudget, as in, I've got a bucket, can you please fill it with cash? And the kind of proposals you see in there are really creative. So some of them are quite, I guess, mundane, straightforward things like, okay, these new team of freelancers have come together and they want to offer a new product in the marketplace. Can you give me $5,000 to build a website and run the first prototype? So it's like an internal fundraising, internal crowdfunding. Can I have some of the collective money to try out this thing? Can I have some money to go to a conference and talk about Enspiral? So some straightforward stuff like that. But then there's also these kind of creative, emergent proposals that come out because you're asking 250 people what they think about spending the money rather than just a little accounting department. So for instance, one that really struck me recently was the counselling bucket, which is you've got all these freelancers, most of them don't have employee benefits. If someone needs counselling but can't afford it, they can go to the counselling bucket where there's a few $1,000s that are sitting there just waiting for that moment. So that has this effect of, like I said, we seem to grow our relationships out of these exchanges. So last summer I was low on cash and I had a lot of time, so I said to the collective, hey, I'd like to take $2,000 to write this series of stories about Enspiral. And everyone said, that's a great idea, have some money. So we've got this kind of opportunity to have an exchange that's going on there. Another thing that's really distinctive about Enspiral, and kind of what brings me here, this is a pie chart. I'm not very good at drawing, so I have to explain myself. That's a pie chart. If you've ever used Loomio, you'll recognize this thing. Loomio is L-O-O-M, as in a loom for weaving. So the idea is with Loomio, you can weave the different perspectives together into a rich tapestry. You can find the software at loomio.org, and you can find our policies and guidelines at loomio.coop. Pretty cool web address, that one. So the distinctive thing about Enspiral and about Loomio is that we make most of our decisions online. So we still have some gatherings, but for the group of 250, it's very difficult to gather them together. So how do you make a consensus decision with that many people, or even a majority rules decision with that many people? We use the software. So Loomio emerged from our experience at Occupy, where we were inspired by the General Assembly and that I don't know how many of you have had the experience of direct democracy, but for me it was transformative. It shifted my understanding of myself and of others, and like what we can do when we really listen and really share and really open ourselves up to the intelligence of other people. But also anyone that has participated in direct democracy will know that it often sucks. And so Loomio kind of emerged out of that paradox. And the idea is that we can enable inclusive, collaborative decisions without always having to be in a meeting. So it's just a really simple software platform. It's a discussion forum like any other discussion forum on the web, but the difference is there's a decision thing. So you'll be talking about currently there's a discussion about our office back home in Wellington, and the rent's just gone up, and we have to renew the lease, and we've got 3 months' notice, and da-da-da. We can have that discussion with people distributed in 4 different countries, and then once we've heard from the different perspectives, what are the options and so on, any of us can put up a proposal and say, I think we should just stick it out and pay the extra 20% and keep the office because it's important. And that will notify everyone in the group there's a new proposal, and everyone's given the opportunity to state their position. So they can agree, yep, good idea. They can abstain, which is a really powerful option to say, none of my business. So my colleague who lives in the States, she's not going to vote on the office decision, but she'll say, I support you, go for it, don't care. Then there's the disagree, which we mean as we could make this better. You know, there's a better option waiting for us. And then there's the block. And the block is, I've got a real serious objection. You really need to stop everything and pay attention to what's going on here because this is screwed. So that's the extent of the technology. It's like that's simple. And we've intentionally kept it as simple as possible to maximize the accessibility and just keep it user-friendly and straightforward and not too clever. And it doesn't do anything else. You have to, like, once you get that information from people, it's up to you to decide what to do with it. So if you have 2 people that disagree and 100 that agree, you decide. Do you listen to them? Do you take their their concerns into consideration and improve the proposal? Or do you say, we've just got to run with it? Sorry, we'll get you next time. It's up to you to decide. And that's often one of the first decisions that you make as a group is, what does a decision? What does it mean? What do we do when somebody disagrees? What are we going to do when someone blocks? You know, so we leave that up as an exercise for you all to figure out. What we find in the small groups, so Loomio is really designed for groups of under like 300. People push it, they do like thousands, but under 300 is where it really works because you have a sense of knowing each other. And what we find is that by moving some of your decisions online, it just vastly improves the quality of your face-to-face time because you're not busy going through reports and doing the line by line on the budget and having an argument about last week's minutes before you've even got into the content of this week's meeting, and then shit, we've got 15 minutes left and we've got these 3 really important decisions, and and I've got this conflict with you, and you know, how the pressure goes up when the time's ticking. By shifting the bulk of your decisions into the online space, people can participate in their own time, and you've got much more space to consider the different options or get into the stuff that you really care about and ignore the stuff you don't. So you get very different dynamics. So it's one you can play with. One of the other things that is distinctive about us, and maybe there's a better drawing for this, but I'm going to do it again anyway. This is my that's magic. Magic. When you checked in, you said something about what it's like working with other humans. Yeah. You know, and there's all these common pitfalls that make us just go, damned if you do, damned if you don't. Humans are just horrible people to work with. My counter to that, I think that, I don't know about you all, but I was raised in a whole stack of different hierarchies. So in my family, I was the bottom of the ladder, and then I went to school, and there was the teacher up there and the principal up there and me down here, and then I went to university, and then I got a job, and there was a boss and the workers, and well, boss, manager, 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 worker. And there's other hierarchies, you know, like the shitty way we treat people that are different genders and different races and different abilities. There's all these hierarchies that we're built inside of that totally shape our experience of the world, and I think inflict these pyramids shapes onto our brain. And so we can say, I'd like to organize non-hierarchically, but we're walking around with these pyramid-shaped brains. And so we need a way of softening the edges off those pyramids and turning them into circles if we're going to organize collaboratively and work together and not, learn how to operate from a position of respect rather than one of domination. So the magic is some kind of process for turning the triangle brain into the circle brain. And the heart, I think, as well. It's not just about the brain. So we do stuff like, all of our meetings, we hear from everyone, how are you feeling? Before we get into any work, how are you feeling? And that's just a little subtle shift that says, we're in a different space than you are normally in. We care about each other's whole person, not just the little bit that they have to show up for work about. And where the trust, that kind of deep trust comes from, is another practice we do, which is a retreat. So every 6 months we go away. So in our co-op of 10 people, we always get all 10 of us together for 3 or 4 days, out of the city, out of the office, preferably somewhere really beautiful and relaxing, because we're in New Zealand and there's lots of options. And we do a little bit of work, but not really. Mostly what we're doing is just cooking up the collective juju together, telling stories, dreaming about the future, playing ukulele, getting to know each other in a really deep way. Because I think consensus only works to the degree that you care about each other. Because if we disagree and we don't care about each other, then who cares? But if I really care about you and you've got a difference of opinion with me, then I really want to understand why. Because I want to strengthen this relationship, not undermine it. So those retreats are where we really start producing an alternative culture that's circular shaped.
When you say we, you're talking about Loomio?
Both Loomio and Enspiral. Co-Budget, actually right now, the Co-Budget team is on retreat in Spain.
Yeah, I think that a part that was not noticed is that Co-Budget and Loomio are both tools that are under the umbrella of Enspiral. So people building them are part of the Enspiral network as well.
Yeah, there's lots of different tools and companies and campaigns and temporary projects and so on.
So is Enspiral, is that global? I get my head around this. Is that the difference between the Enspiral is people talking on a global level, like Australia?
It's mostly the bulk of us live in New Zealand, but there is a good fraction now that are overseas. So there's a kind of a base in the Bay Area and one in Spain and one in the UK. There's sort of like new home bases look like they're starting to form, but they haven't quite reached critical mass yet. One of the other difficulties of working with humans, one of the things we inherit from our hierarchical lives, is a very uneven distribution of certain kinds of work. So when you're working in a group, there's a whole lot of work that needs to be done to look after people's well-being and emotions and relationships and handling conflict and all that sort of stuff. In lots of groups, there's no way to see that work happening and there's no way to distribute it fairly. And so it usually falls on a couple of people, maybe one person. Often it's a woman. For some reason, we've decided as a society that women look after people. And the work is not seen, it's not appreciated, it's not supported, it's not accountable, and that leads to all kinds of really toxic dynamics for everyone involved. And so many groups I've been in, there's been one person doing that work. I didn't even know they were doing that work because I've been socialized not to see it. And then they burn out because they never signed up to do it. They're just doing it because they thought it was important. They leave and then the group collapses because no one's looking after the relationships. So we've structurally distributed that work of caring for each other with this system we call the Steward Circle. So if we were doing it here, I would be Nati's steward, Nati would be your steward, you would be his steward, and it goes all the way around to me. And the nature of that relationship is up for grabs. You decide together what it's going to be like. As a sort of general direction, we would meet once a month, and I would say, how's it going? How's your work? How are your relationships? Is there something that I can do to support you? Is there some kind of, can I be your advocate in a conflict? Or do you have some goals that I can remind you of next month? Or whatever it is, that thing that you do when you're talking with someone and listening to the answer and just being there, that's the thing that happens. And we all practice doing that for someone and receiving that from someone. So that vastly increases the emotional intelligence in the group.
And those relationships changeable? Are they timed?
Yeah, so we set them sort of like, you want about a year at least to get to know someone, so that when you're in a really sticky situation, it's someone you trust and you can call them in to support you. But you also want to move them around over time to keep cross-pollinating. Especially we connect people that don't normally see each other. Another piece, boundaries. I think community is defined by its boundaries. and there needs to be some kind of explicit set of norms if your group is going to be held over a long time. It can be really basic stuff like we don't do sexism and racism, or it could be a little bit more nuanced, like yeah, when we come to a meeting we talk about our feelings, or participation is optional, or whatever is the norms that you want to agree. There has to be a bit, I think, where they're exposed and put on the wall and you agree together, this is how we're going to behave. I just joined a community, it's like 1,000 software people around the US that are working, it's the Progressive Coders Network, so they're working on progressive projects. And when I joined, they sent me a 5-page document that said, this is how we behave here. If you want to behave like this, you're welcome. If you step out of line, well, if you get close to that boundary, this is what will happen, and if you cross the boundary, this is what will happen. And they just made it really, really clear, and now I feel totally at ease working there, and I understand what's expected of me. So it lifts the quality of relationships and interactions that are going on in those groups, and it also means they've got a strong foundation to stand on when they need to kick someone out. Okay. Quite appropriately, here's a clock. I can't guarantee that there's 12 notches there, but that looks a little bit clockish. So one of the other, one of the reasons, the main justification for working in a hierarchy in the first place is it's about managing information flows. So if you're in a pyramid, you have reports go up and then decisions come down, and the engineers don't have to worry about the designers, and they don't have to, the designers don't have to worry about the salespeople, and you've got managers to sort out the correct siloing of information. And so I just ask you about the stuff that's relevant to you. I don't ask everyone. So if you remove the hierarchy, then suddenly you find yourself just drenched in information overload, and it can be really killer. And it tends to, within your group, select for the people that have the highest capacity for handling information. So someone like me, who is like a very fast typist and a very fast reader, I can have an opinion about everything. And then someone who's like busy with their kids, or just doesn't really like being on the computer that much, or whatever, lags behind, and I wind up having a disproportionate influence. So one of the big challenges of working collectively is how do you handle that information overload problem? And the most reliable method I've seen for that is rhythm. So in that coders group that I just mentioned, there's 1,000 people, and every day there's a community manager that sends an announcement out to everyone. This is what's happening today. If you've got time, these are the places to go. This is the stuff you need to know. And it's like, so I know that of all of the 1,000, there's like hundreds of projects, and I could just get completely lost in there. But I just know there's one place that I go every day if I'm interested, I have time. This is where the information is going to be, and it makes it really, really simple to engage there. Whereas if I didn't have that regular touch point, I would just be completely out of touch. At Enspiral, we do a sprint, which is a 2-week thing instead of a daily thing. So at the start of the sprint, one of my colleagues, another catalyst, will say, hey, we're starting, they use dumb words, so it's like, today's one was like blinding flower or something. It's sprint blinding flower. It lasts for 2 weeks. Tune in here and tell us what you're up to, and that becomes we do that on Loomio. This is the place where you can find out where to contribute. We do, within Loomio, within our co-op, we have a space for, I said there's 6 monthly retreats. That's one rhythm, so it's like the heartbeat of our co-op. And then at the 3 monthly, which is a slightly faster rhythm, we have a day of deliberation where we make a consensus decision together. What are our top 3 objectives for the next 3 months? So that's like really, really, really high level. We're going to release this big chunk of functionality on the software. We're going to get 50,000 new users, and Richard's going to find $2 million so we can keep going. And we get consensus at that level. Once every 3 months, we set a new set of objectives, and then in the intervening period, there's a huge amount of autonomy for you to figure out how you're going to achieve that. You don't have to stop and ask everyone all the time, hey, do you think I should go to LA or San Diego? Like, it's up to me. But because we've built that rhythm over time, people know there's a place, it's coming, it's 6 weeks away, there's going to be another checkpoint. So I can save my strategic question for then and not bring it into today's weekly meeting, which is about little detail stuff. So yeah, different meetings for different kinds of information. And I think one of the things that I've done the most at Loomio is just hold that rhythm like clockwork, so that people know reliably every day. There's this thing happening every month. There's this thing happening, and
So
that
the strategy meetings are monthly or 6 weeks?
3 monthly.
So there's nothing between the 1 week and the 3 months?
I haven't explained the whole lot.
No.
We've got lots of different spaces. Yeah, you can find out on Loomio.coop. That one I actually really recommend. It's written quite accessibly, and lays it all out. And you'll copy it, and some of it will work, and some of it you'll have to adjust for yourself. But that leads me very well to the last one that I wanted to draw up, which is about having a structured reflection process. If there's one thing you do when you go back to your company or your co-op or your project or your whatever, this is tied up with the rhythm thing. We do this on a regular basis. So within Loomio, every 2 weeks, we stop and we go, thinking back on the last 2 weeks, what was good? We should do more of that. And what was bad? Let's stop doing that. And what can we do differently next time that will make it more good and less bad? As simple as that. It's like 1 hour every 2 weeks. And that means we're actually stopping the work and we're learning. We're explicitly learning together. And it's a systematic way to uncover all of the dissent and the tension and the frustration and this isn't quite working properly, and translate that into an innovation. So if our 3 monthly strategy meeting wasn't quite working, we might go, actually, let's try it with every 2 months. So there's a space where you can say this isn't really functioning. So we're continuously in the process of just tweaking our structures. So it softens people up a lot more to try new things, and they don't get so attached that will freak out like, we can't possibly try this new process because it'll be stuck forever. They loosen up, they realize, like, well, if it doesn't work, we'll give it a run, we'll do it a couple of weeks, couple of months, and then if it doesn't, well, we can do something else. So that is a lot of information. There's 8 circular diagrams that try and capture some of the patterns that have worked. I hope some of it's useful, and Nati's going to host us through some process to decompress that and turn it into action.